I just want to leave you with just one thing, okay? Please turn to Luke chapter 24, verse 27. Luke chapter 24, verse 27. So Luke chapter 24 verse 27 says that beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So the title of this course was what? Discovering Jesus in the Old Testament, right? I hope that you can see that Jesus is everywhere in the Old Testament, right?
Yes.
And even here, Jesus, after he resurrected, he appeared to the two disciples going down to Emmaus. And from Moses, meaning from all the way from Genesis throughout the entire Old Testament, he explained to them everything about himself in the Old Testament, right? Remember we read Acts chapter 13, verse 27? Can we look at that also? Acts chapter 13, 27. I think we read this at the beginning of the course. For those who dwell in Jerusalem and their rulers, because they did not know him, nor even the voices of the prophets which are read every Sabbath, have fulfilled them in condemning him. So, what did they read every Sabbath? The Old Testament, right? They read the Old Testament every week, and because they didn't understand it, they killed Jesus. And the Old Testament prophesied that the Messiah would be killed like that, right? So they read it, and they didn't understand what they were reading, and they had no idea what they were doing. They fulfilled the words of the Old Testament without even knowing it. So I hope that you will take more interest in the Old Testament. Okay? The New Testament is basically fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies, right? So if you don't know the prophecies and the promises of the Old Testament, you don't know what they're fulfilling, you will not appreciate what the New Testament is all about. So you have to know the Old Testament in order to truly appreciate the New Testament. Okay? And the books that Reverend Abraham Park has written are very good guides to understanding the difficult parts of the Old Testament. So I hope that you guys will take time to read those books and really study the Old Testament, right? So I have a little time so I could open it up to some questions to you guys. Yeah, go ahead.
In Psalms 22 verse 6, why did David describe Jesus as a worm?
As a what?
Worm.
In Psalm 22?
Yeah, verse 6.
Let's see, Psalm 22, verse 6. Oh, but I am a worm and not a man, a reproach of men, and despised by the people. Okay, Psalm 22, yes. Verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is what Jesus said, the fourth utterance on the cross, right? So when Jesus uttered the fourth utterance, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why was Jesus saying this? Jesus is God, isn't he? Was he forsaken by God? So at this point, he had brought himself down to the level of sinners like this. He was speaking on their behalf. My God, why have you forsaken me? So he had come down to the lowest level of sinners. And that's why I hear it saying that I am a worm and not a man. A representative of that kind of a sinner is the thief on the left, right? Who even in the pains and agony of hanging on the cross, did not defend Jesus, right? He attacked Jesus, right? Or verbally attacked Jesus and would not even accept him. So Jesus is going down to his level, to the lowest part, and speaking on their behalf. And I think that's why he's been called a worm here. Next question.
Is there any reason why that book is called The Covenant of the Torch?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. See, in order to understand this really well, you have to know what the covenant of the torch is. What is the covenant of the torch? That's the covenant in Genesis 15. That's the covenant that God made with Abraham. And sometimes it's known as the covenant between the pieces. But Reverend Abraham Hart called it the covenant of the torch. Why? I think we read that verse, right? How do you make a covenant in ancient Near East? You cut an animal in half, and the two parties of the covenant walk between the pieces, and that's signified like an oath, saying, I swear that if I don't keep this covenant, I will be cut in half like this, right? But what went between the pieces? Only the flaming torch, right? And that symbolized the presence of God. So God was saying, I swear upon myself that I will keep this covenant, right? And the content of the covenant was that Abraham's descendants will possess the land of Canaan, but they will be oppressed in a foreign nation for 400 years, which is Egypt, right? And then they will return in the 4th generation. So this wilderness journey is the process of returning. So it's all about how God fulfilled the covenant of the torch. That's why the book is called the Covenant of the Torch. Yeah. So you guys know why he said in the 4th generation you guys will return? Who's the 4th generation? Read the book. Yeah. Any other questions? That's it. All right. Let's. Oh.
I was wondering, since we have time, right? Do you remember on the first day or second day or something, when we read about Acts 7, then you said like, how come in the Old Testament, it was the land at Shechem was bought by, in the Old Testament it was Jacob, but
right.
New Testament they wrote Abraham, as well as the 75 and 70. Since we have time, like, can we answer that? Thank you.
Wow, good answer. So, do you understand her question?
Yeah.
I think it's Acts chapter 7, verse 15, right? Yeah. All right. From 14 through 16. So Joseph sent word and invited Jacob, his father, and all his relatives to come to him, 75 persons in all. But in the Old Testament, it's a total of 70 persons. This one is pretty simple. It's because in the Septuagint it was translated as the 75. You guys know what the Septuagint is, right? It's the Greek translation of the Old Testament. And the reason why they said 75 is because they included Joseph and his children that were born in Egypt all the way down to like his grandson and great-grandson, I think. So 5 more were included. Don't know why the Septuagint did it like that. So Stephen is quoting from the Septuagint because he spoke Greek. So that's why he says 75. Now, verse 15, the important parts are this. It says, Jacob died in Egypt, and from there he was buried in Shechem, right? But Joseph was buried in Shechem, right? That's in Joshua chapter 24, verse 32. So can we have the verses on the board? So Joshua 24, 32 says that there we go. The bones of Joseph, which the children of Israel had brought up out of Egypt, they buried at Shechem, right? In the plot of ground which Jacob had bought, right? But in Acts, it said that Jacob was buried at Shechem and Abraham bought Shechem. Right? So why is Stephen saying that and contradicting the Old Testament? Also, Genesis 33 verses 18 and 19 is when Jacob actually purchases Shechem, the land of Shechem. Okay, this is the reason why. Because and through studying the Genesis genealogies, we've been emphasizing how important it is to pass on the faith, right? To transmit the faith to the next generation. That is the key, starting from Adam and especially starting from Abraham. The reason why God chose Abraham is so that he may teach his children to walk in God's ways, to receive the faith, right? That is one of the reasons why God chose Abraham. Okay? So, spiritually speaking, physically, it was Jacob who bought Shechem, but spiritually, it was Abraham who taught Jacob about the importance of Shechem. Why was Shechem so important to Abraham? Let's go to Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. Let's read from verse 6. Genesis chapter 12, verse 6. Abram passed through the land as far as the side of Shechem to the oak of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your descendants I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. So what's going on here is this. Abraham now left Haran. He came into Canaan. And as he was coming, God never appeared to him. He came into Canaan. Now he's in a foreign land, right? Very scared. God never appeared to him. But then God appears to him at Shechem. So that's the first time and the first place where God appeared to Abraham in Canaan. And this is the first time that God told Abraham which land he will give to him. God kept promising Abraham, saying, I'm going to send you to this place, I'm going to give you that land, right? God never specifically said which land. And Shechem was the first place that God appeared to Abraham in Canaan and specifically told him which land he was going to give to him. And he said, I'm going to give you this land, right? So that land, in Abraham's mind, at first it's Shechem. Oh, he's going to give me Shechem. Because, we always think smaller. God's thinking bigger, right? God was thinking about the whole of Canaan. So starting from that point in Abraham's mind, Shechem and Canaan are like equal. They're the same. Shechem represents Canaan. Shechem represents the promised land. That's the first time that God specified which land he would give to him, right? So to Abraham, Shechem is very important. And he passed this on to his children, to Isaac and to Jacob. And that's why Jacob bought Shechem with money when he was returning back from Padan Aram, because he learned this from his grandfather Abraham. So spiritually, physically it was Jacob who bought this land, but spiritually it was Abraham who taught Jacob the importance of Shechem, and that's why the Holy Spirit told Stephen to say, Abraham bought that land. It was Abraham's faith in Jacob that moved him to buy the land. Right? And then, same thing. Joseph was buried at Shechem. Why? Because Jacob, before he died, told Joseph the importance of Shechem. And not only that, he said, I will give you one more portion. When Jacob blessed his children, he said to Joseph, I'll give you one more portion than your brothers. Because Joseph is the spiritual firstborn, right? Firstborns are supposed to get double portion. So Jacob said to Joseph, I'll give you one more portion than your brothers. But the Hebrew word there for one portion is Shechem. It means it's Shechem. Okay, so some Bibles translate it as, I will give you Shechem. Right? To Joseph. So Joseph learned the importance of Shechem from his father Jacob. Jacob, at his deathbed, just before he died, told Joseph, I'll give you Shechem, that's yours. And told him the importance of that land, right? So that's why Joseph asked his children to take his bones up from Egypt and bury him at Shechem, right? So he was buried at Shechem because he learned from his father Jacob the importance of Shechem. So it was Jacob's faith that was passed on to Joseph that made Joseph get buried there. So Shechem is a place where the transmission of faith took place and it was fulfilled. So it shows us this, right? And that's why Stephen preached it that way, in a spiritual way. Spiritually, behind the scenes, it was Abraham who bought it through Jacob. Spiritually, behind the scenes, it was Jacob's faith that enabled Joseph to be buried there. Okay? Alright. Wow, that took long. No more questions, right?
Can I ask about the crucifixion? Like when Jesus was crucified, and it was said that the soldiers would cast lots to get his garments, and also the wine offered to him. Is there any significance to that?
What was the second part?
The wine offered to him.
The wine?
Wine. What is it? Yeah.
Oh, the sour wine? Okay. Wow, there is significance to all those things. That would take another hour to explain. The wine on the hyssop, right? They dipped hyssop in the wine and gave it to him. Wow, yeah. And the outer garments were divided, and they divided it up, but the inner garment, they cast lots for, and it went to one person. What's the best way to answer this in a short thing? I don't know. Outer garment and inner garment. 4 symbolize, the number 4 symbolizes the world. Why? The 4 cardinal points of the world, right? North, south, east, and west. So the 4 divisions of the outer garment symbolizes the gospel of Christ going to the 4 corners of the world. It will spread throughout the world. Okay. And then the inner garment, it will be passed on to one person. The returning Christ, when Christ returns, He will give us the true meaning of the Bible. The one true meaning of the Bible. That's the short answer. Anything else? Time's up. What?
The wine.
Oh, the wine. Oh, yeah, there's really no way to answer that right now. Seriously, I'm sorry. The wine and the hyssop. Maybe next year when I come back, I'll have an answer.